Buonasera a tutti. Questo incontro è in inglese e chi non sa l'inglese alzi la mano. Aiuto. Aiutatelo perché temo che non riuscirò a fare la traduzione simultanea. Io sono Anna Masera, faccio una piccola introduzione in italiano perché per fortuna Matthias Lüfkens tra le varie lingue che sa anche un po' di italiano, però abbiamo pensato che non sia giusto costringerlo a fare tutto il suo intervento in italiano, per cui lo faremo in inglese. Sono Anna Masera, sono social media editor della Stampa e questo evento che mi ha portato qui a Milano mi ricorda un evento simile di un anno fa a Torino intitolato Twiplomacy, e abbiamo qui di fianco Mr. Twiplomacy, perché Matthias Lüfkens è vero che adesso lavora in Borsa Masteller ed è il guru dei social media, però Twiplomacy è una sua creatura fin dai tempi del World Economic Forum di Davos, e a Torino abbiamo fatto proprio un anno fa con Alec J. Ross, che era il consigliere per l'innovazione di Hillary Clinton, è venuto a Torino per quell'evento e aveva rilasciato un'intervista a Mario Calabresi che iniziava così: il mondo non sta cambiando, il mondo è già cambiato, è più trasparente, con meno gerarchie, è meno piramidale, e grazie a Internet 2.0, cioè grazie a Twitter, di fatto siamo qua a parlare di Twitter, sta trasformando tutto il potere, la politica, la diplomazia e il giornalismo. Insomma, sta trasformando il mondo. Ecco, Alec J. Ross ce lo disse a Twiplomacy il 14 giugno scorso. C'era il ministro Terzi, c'era la blogger tunisina Lina Ben Menni, ed era all'ILO, all'International Labour Organization dell'ONU, che c'è a Torino. E è passato un anno e in quest'anno è successo tantissimo qui in Italia, perché mentre il Twiplomacy era, diciamo, flourished, right? Si dice in inglese, in tutti i paesi del mondo, e mentre negli altri paesi su Twitter già c'erano tutti i governi, ma tantissimi ministri, cioè la politica oramai era passata su Twitter, in Italia ancora non era così. Il vero salto è stato quest'anno. Questo è stato l'anno di Twitter, questo nel senso tutto il 2012, e siamo in un anno in cui oramai adesso nel 2013 con le elezioni voi avete visto che i nostri ministri, i nostri politici sono tutti su Twitter e sono costretti, chi lo fa meglio, chi lo fa peggio, sono costretti comunque a rispondere ai cittadini, perché questo rapporto diretto li costringe a essere più democratici e più attenti alla gente rispetto al broadcasting tradizionale dei mezzi che usavano prima, per cui hanno imparato molto in fretta e le cose effettivamente stanno cambiando. Poi non sappiamo, abbiamo 1000 critiche da fare su come lo stanno facendo, e le faremo qui, e sarà divertente anche farlo con voi. Io pensavo di organizzare quest'ora e mezza in questo modo, di dare la parola a Matthias Lüfkens, che ci farà una presentazione, una sua lunga presentazione per raccontare Twitter, come sta cambiando il mondo. La fa con PowerPoint, per cui si alzerà e si metterà lì, però io vi farei avere il microfono, se alzate la mano, se avete domande, volete interromperlo perché c'è qualcosa che non capite o c'è qualcosa che secondo voi è importante dire subito, ci alzate la mano e vi diamo il microfono, altrimenti poi teniamo uno spazio per le Q&A, per le questions and answers, e per piacere facciamolo in inglese. So I'm sorry, Matthias Lüfkens, if I spoke in Italian for the introduction, but I did this for the one person who doesn't seem to speak English, but everybody seems to have no problem with the English language, so go ahead with your presentation, and we'll stop you if we don't understand something, okay?
Ok.
Thank you.
Grazie Anna, mi dispiace che non faccio questo intervento in italiano, ma io penso che il mio italiano non è molto buono e non ho parlato da molto tempo. Dunque, as Anna said, this is a social media presentation, so please feel free to interrupt me either by raising your hand, sending me a tweet, which I will read probably later. Just for Also, for you to know, the presentation is on SlideShare already. You have the link there, bur.sn HQ8MA on SlideShare. Which this presentation on SlideShare is slightly longer. I decided to reduce it a little bit. So we're talking about governments, public squares, and palaces, how Twitter has already changed the world. Last year, we did a study about diplomacy, as we called it, Twitter and diplomacy, how world leaders, heads of state and heads of government are using Twitter. Now, the idea of this study was not to see who has the most followers. We know that is Barack Obama. But what is really interesting is to see, are these people connected on Twitter? Because once you're connected on Twitter, with mutually following each other, you can send each other direct messages. And I believe the direct messages on Twitter are probably more secure than the US government cables. So this study is almost, today somebody tweeted this is a slightly outdated study. I have to admit, over the past 6 months, so many things have changed. Italy, for example, wasn't included. Now you have the Palazzo Chigi and Quirinale on Twitter, and also, as Anna pointed out, the politicians, also with Senatore Monti. So I've been updating the study, or looking at it through a Twitter account which is called Twiplomacy, and at my latest count 2 days ago, I found there are 75%, 3/4 of the governments of the world, and there are 194 UN member states, have a Twitter presence. Out of these, 141 heads of state and heads of government are on Twitter, either with an institutional account or a personal account. And this year we will update the study. We will also include foreign ministers, and as of today, 56 foreign ministers are on Twitter, and we'll see Giulio Terzi in a couple of minutes. One of them, who does Twitter really well, is the UK's Foreign Minister, William Hague. He tweeted once, Twitter is a good way to get in touch with me, one of the new faces of 21st century diplomacy, and good for democracy too. He's not the only one. There's also Carl Bildt. Carl Bildt is the Swedish foreign minister. He was the first one to use email, to send an email to Bill Clinton when he was prime minister of Sweden. Today he's the foreign minister, and a year ago he tried to get in touch with his colleague in Bahrain. What did he use? He used Twitter, publicly mentioning Khalid al-Khalifa, trying to get in touch with you on an issue. So everybody thought he had a DM fail. He didn't want to send this tweet publicly, but actually he wanted to send a direct message. No. He did this intentionally, on purpose. And basically later it was about an issue of a Swedish citizen who was detained in Bahrain. And Khalid al-Khalifa actually answered him on Twitter. Nice to hear from you, to catch up on matters. Your tweet caught the world's interest, of course. So currently we see a diplomatic push. A couple of days ago, the Swedish Foreign Ministry sent this: before the end of the month, all of our embassies will be on Twitter and Facebook. So here, what you see here is social media is not just bottom up. In government circles, you need really the top-down leadership from Carl Bildt. So today they tweeted that 18 embassies and missions are on Twitter. Let's see if they can reach all of them on Twitter by the end of this month. I'm not too sure about the Swedish embassy in Beijing in China, if they're allowed to be on Twitter, because Twitter is officially banned in that country. But Sweden is not the first country to put its embassies on Twitter. There are quite a few great examples. There's Turkey, there's Poland, Mexico. For the past 2 years, the Mexican embassies, 74 Mexican embassies are on Twitter, 13 ambassadors. Israel has 125 embassies and diplomatic missions on Twitter, and the UK Foreign Office 163 at the last count, with 30 ambassadors, and they're all obliged to tweet. The difficulty, of course, is how to get started. This is Michael Higgins, President of Ireland, sending my first tweet a couple of years ago when he ran for the presidency. The next tweet was, well, that seems to have been a success. So you all know the latest arrival on Twitter is the Pope, Benedict XVI. I think the way he started his Twitter was absolutely amazing in terms of public relations, because first the spokesperson announced that by the end of the year he will be on Twitter. Then he set up the Twitter account in 6 languages, and then only 2 weeks later he sent his first tweet. And this first tweet is actually called a twoosh. Do you know what a twoosh is? A twoosh is a tweet where you use every single one of the 140 characters. So this first tweet was actually really difficult to retweet as is. Well, you can just retweet it as is, but if your Twitter handle is longer, it doesn't. It's difficult to add any comment to this tweet. But anyway, 64,000 people retweeted this and 24,000 favorited it. So José Manuel Barroso started on Twitter in September last year. Delighted to join all of you on Twitter. Let's build Europe together, signing JMB, his first tweet. So he was greeted by his peers and colleagues and also Foreign Minister Giulio Terzi. Welcome on Twitter to President Barroso. EU, more Europe on social networks, a direct medium of dialogue and interaction. Thank you very much. Grazie miles, replied Barroso. But the fact is, Giulio Terzi is following Barroso on Twitter, but he is not following him back. Actually, Giulio Terzi is only following 15 of his colleagues, 15 other Twitter users, and he's actually ignoring quite a few who follow him. For example, we've seen Carl Bildt. Carl Bildt does follow Giulio Terzi. Giulio Terzi doesn't follow back. The French Foreign Ministry is following Giulio Terzi. He does not follow back. The German Foreign Ministry is also following Giulio Terzi, but he still is not following back. So I hopefully they will get the message today. They have to follow more other Twitter users, starting, of course, with the peers, but then why not journalists? The journalists who are covering international affairs, quite a few. But having said this, it is not a race for followers. This is a tweet from Nelly Kroes, who basically tweeted that now Herman Van Rompuy, the president of the of Europe, has overtaken her in the numbers of followers. It is not a race for followers. It is really about the connections, about the interaction that you have on Twitter. And what kind of interaction are there? Of course, there are policy statements. Herman Van Rompuy spreading good news for Montenegro. The European Council has endorsed the decision to open accession negotiations this afternoon, and he does mention the government of Montenegro, which is me government, to which the Croatian government replied, me government, congratulations, because Croatia is also waiting to be accepted to the European Union. It's quite interesting to see how some political leaders use this. The Turkish president tweets mainly in Turkish. He does have other accounts, and the Turkish foreign minister has several language accounts. But Abdullah Gül tweets mainly in Turkish, except when he has a serious statement to make. So this one, Turkey's membership will enrich the EU, is just one of those political statements which he wants to tweet in English to an international audience. The Russian foreign minister used Twitter to announce the closure of the US aid office in Russia, that it must stop operating in Russia on October 1st last year. What did the US ambassador to Russia do? Well, he took to Twitter to say, we regret this decision, and send a modified tweet, an MT, to the Russian foreign ministry. So instead of having a diplomatic note or calling in the Russian ambassador in Washington, he used Twitter directly to express his dismay to this decision. And then one of the most important, most retweeted political statement was Barack Obama's announcement that same-sex couples should be able to get married. This one wasn't a personal tweet. This is signed. This is a quote from Barack Obama when he said this. His personal tweets are signed B.O. And he did this, he started this a year and a half ago with the first Twitter town hall, where he was basically answering 8 questions that were put to him through Twitter in a live video chat with the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, from the White House, this Twitter tunnel. Since then, because of the election campaign, he's become quite active. He was quite active on the social channels of the White House, doing frequent Twitter chats. You also know that he did a Reddit chat on Reddit, an Ask Me Anything session. But he took to Twitter quite often and answering a couple of questions, sometimes 10, 20, something like this. Somebody who's doing it really, really well, again, is the Swedish foreign minister. After the statement about the Swedish foreign policy last week in Parliament, he spent half an hour answering questions on Twitter following the debate. And actually, in half an hour, he was able to answer 62 questions in 30 minutes. Now, think about that. 62 questions in 30 minutes. If you have a press conference, never would he be able to answer 62 questions in 30 minutes. So Twitter really, lets us communicate much more directly with our leaders. And the other thing is you don't need to have a journalist card to answer questions, to ask questions to our leaders. Somebody who's doing a really, really good job is Amama Mbabazi, the Prime Minister of Uganda. I'm ready now. All welcome to our first tweet up this year, to which Antonio de Ruda, who is in the room here, replied, "You're a great model of how a politician should use Twitter." To which he replied, "Well, thank you for your kind appreciation." Actually, if you look at Amama Mbabazi, 96% of his tweets are at mentions, at replies to other Twitter users. So these at replies don't really, if you follow him, you won't see all this Twitter chatter, because at replies are only seen by people who follow both the person who is mentioned and the person who sends it. So it is really, really interesting to look at his account. So he sits down in the evening, on his iPad and just answers a random question. Another great example is this one. This is a word cloud with the tweets of the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame also sits down. 92% of his tweets are actually at replies. Here, happy weekend to you, Mr. President. Well, same to you. Have a good weekend. Thanks. He famously got into a Twitter spat with UK journalist Ian Birrell, who had called him despotic and deluded, to which Paul Kagame replied, "You have no basis for your comments and you don't know what you're talking about, me or Rwanda. I will only hold all that in contempt." It is quite interesting, if you also look at his Twitter account, he does quite often pick fights with people who criticize his leadership or who criticize Rwanda. But as we've seen recently, these Twitter chats also happen in Italy. Mario Monti started his Twitter adventure with the Monti Live Q&A. And what was really nice is that even on Twitter, you can make people smile. So here we have Paolo Iabichino. He said, "Caro Senatore Monti, riesce a farcelo un sorriso almeno qui? Non è difficile. 2 punti, trattino, parentesi, tonda chiusa. E ecco, Iabicos, basta così, grazie." Dunque, we can make, you can make politicians laugh on Twitter and they become very, very personal. I do think that's it's a great example. Another example is the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Karim Masimov. He announced his resignation also on his Twitter account. He actually had a Russian and an English Twitter account. He submitted his resignation. Before that, he was asking for help, looking for, can anybody do simultaneous interpreting in more than 5 languages? Please reply. I've checked that tweet. He didn't get any replies. So some world leaders tweeting advice, like the Prime Minister of Rwanda urges his citizens to increase their working hours and avoid wasting time drinking alcohol so as to develop. Really endearing. Of course, among friends, the other thing is what foreign ministers do quite often. They're sending each other birthday greetings. So here's the Foreign Minister of Latvia, sending happy birthday greetings to Linas Linkevičius, who is the new Foreign Minister of Lithuania, who was very happy. I thank all my friends for these kind birthday greetings and for welcoming me on Twitter, because he also just recently took to Twitter. Carl Bildt is quite interesting. He's very, very personal. So he was in Santiago in Chile a couple of weeks ago, had a couple of hours off and decided a haircut was needed, to which his Finnish counterpart replied, Carl Bildt, twit pic, please. The importance of pictures, I can't stress the importance of pictures in a Twitter stream and the power of pictures. You all know this picture. Who does not know this picture? Actually, this is the most retweeted picture, this is the most retweeted tweet on Twitter with over 850,000 retweets. It is the most liked picture on Facebook, and a very, very powerful image of the Barack Obama's victory. And think about it, that is, you know, if that is the most retweeted tweet, how short it is. 3 words and a link, 4 more years and the link to the tweet pic. Absolutely brilliant. Now, if we look at other people who use TwitPic, like Giulio Terzi, his pictures are very traditional. Handshake, handshake, meeting this person, meeting that person, and handshake again. Now, you will agree with me, we don't want handshake pictures. We want a behind-the-scene look, like this one. This is the Somali foreign minister, joined Twitter also very recently, and her advisor took a picture at the United Nations Security Council where she defended the Somali cause at a briefing on Somalia. So these are the kind of pictures that I think are more interesting. Or John Kerry, when he was in front of the Senate committee to be named new US Secretary of State. So this is giving a new perspective from the witness table, because a couple of months ago he was on the other side. The power of pictures is very, very important, like this one. William Hague recently met 2 representatives from the Falkland Islands, and they had invited the Argentine foreign minister, Hector Timerman, to that meeting, but you know, for obvious reasons, Mr. Timerman refused to meet at the Foreign Office with people who live in the Malvinas, as it's called, and you'll see the empty chair there. That was a very clear sign there, you know, one person was missing in this meeting. But other people use Twitter, you know, to promote products. Here you have Russia's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev showing off the new Stritz pistol, an advanced product by our Russian gun makers. Actually, Dmitry Medvedev is quite good. He's an amateur photographer and likes to take pictures, like this one. He visited Kunashir. Kunashir is on the far eastern part of the Russian Empire, and Kunashir is also a disputed island with Japan. So when he tweets, this is the second time he went to this island, you can imagine the reaction of the Japanese government. They were not very happy with seeing again a visit by Russia's head of government on these disputed island just to stake his claim. He is also staking the claim, as you can see on Twitter. What sometimes people do is also, you know, tweeting pictures of their animals. So, you know, I guess you all know MP by now, Empatia, or yeah, MP for Friends. Mario Monti is not the only one who has tweeted pictures with animals. You have Canada's Stephen Harper showing off this picture, one of the best from last year, with a panda in China. The Sheikh Mohammed, of the ruler of Dubai, is showing off his 2-year-old colt. A couple of that's a year ago already. You know, he had high expectations for this horse. I don't know if it won anything. And the president of Mongolia becoming the new Genghis Khan. You check out his Twitter feed. It is absolutely brilliant, the photos that he shares in different. This is not the only animal picture he has on his account. But to be more serious, what is really important, what I think politicians should do, is really engage their audience. So you have the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, who a year ago decided, to give a present to his 500,000th follower, and he was asking his Twitter followers, I'm thinking of handing personally a gift to the 500,000th follower. Any idea on what we should give? A couple of weeks later, you could see him having breakfast with 5 of his followers, in a canteen in Kuala Lumpur. Same William Hague recently invited 5 of his followers to meet him at the Foreign Office and just to discuss with people like you and me about the foreign policy, people interested in foreign policy. I think this, of course, he can't invite all the 50,000 or more followers he has, but it's quite nice that some of them are represented. What the Foreign Office also did was asking help to formulate its digital strategy, to anyone who wanted to comment on the Foreign Office blog. And basically, if you want a great example of a digital strategy, look at the Foreign Office blog. Everything is there, free access. It's really interesting how Foreign Office staff should use Twitter, etc. And of course, another great example is people's diplomacy done by the Swedish government and the Swedish Institute. They basically set up the @Sweden account. Very few countries actually own their country name, their English country name on Twitter. We looked at it, there's only 9 countries. Sweden is one of them, and this is a great example of curation rotation. So every week, another Swede is allowed to tweet on the Sweden account to now 67,000 followers. There were some incidents in June last year when there was a particularly racist person, tweeting on the account, and a couple of months ago, somebody who didn't use words that are normally used in the diplomatic language, but she said on her profile she does like to say F a lot. So you have to have the courage to do this, and I think I commend the Swedish Foreign Minister to give this account to the people. I think that's a great example of diplomacy. The other problem with Twitter, when politicians use Twitter, is they sometimes only use it for electoral purposes. This is Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil. She became really the Twitter hero in 2010. When she was elected on the 1st of November, she sent then a couple of more tweets and basically said, I'm looking forward to have more time to speak with you in 2012. At that time, she had 400,000 followers, and she hasn't sent a single tweet since. How many followers do you think she has now? 1.7 million. Now that shows that we want to hear from her, or the Brazilians, want to hear from their president. Unfortunately, she will only reactivate it when it comes to re-election next year. Another person who has signed off from Twitter is the French President François Hollande, very, very active until the 18th of May last year when he was elected, when he signed off with a Follow Friday. Please follow the Élysée Palace for all the information about the presidency of the Republic. He had almost 400,000 followers. How many does he have today? Over 500,000. Once again, we really want to hear from our leaders. Some leaders do actually tweet personally, and a great example here is the Estonian president, Toomas Hendrik Ilves. It's really a great account to follow. He started last year. He's actually the first leader who have to use a swear word in his tweets. He was actually responding to an article by Paul Krugman, the economist, in the New York Times, and really point by point taking to Twitter. He did that on his iPad one evening when he was very, very unhappy. It's also okay to make spelling mistakes. This is, spelling with 5 words and 2 mistakes, meeting the mayor of Shanghai. So the person here running the Twitter account of Herman van Rompuy was obviously French-speaking. Other examples are like rogue tweets. Like this is a tweet from the South African president. Oh no, I'm missing out. He's on a state visit to China. And he tweets, oh no, I'm missing out on Idol's South Africa. I'm far away in another time zone. Oops. the social media manager had, used the official account for his private messages. And then, so they repeat, a couple of minutes later, the last tweet was not an official tweet from the presidency or the president, but rather an administrative error. Our apologies. Well, they deleted the tweet and apologized. But the other leaders are oversharing, coming back to Amam Bambazi, somebody says, I can't get in touch with you, your email listed on the parliamentary website bounces. And so he says, well, try my Gmail, amamamba@gmail.com, which is quite nice. Which also to see, people who are funny. The Finnish foreign minister on his Twitter profile, it actually says, he doesn't take himself very seriously. And if you look at his Twitter stream, it's a pleasure to read. So here's in a cabinet meeting dealing with salmon quotas, salmon sandwiches on offer, which I like. You can be personal, but I would say not too often. This is the tweet from Barack Obama to Michelle Obama for Valentine's Day, signed BO. Now the question is, in which language should you tweet? Gott niet or. Anybody knows what that means? No? Well, he did follow it up with a second tweet. Norwegian is not for everybody, so Happy New Year to all of you. It's a nice way. And of course, world leaders do go on holidays, like Jacob Zuma, and taking a few days off to rest and enjoy, watching the sun rise and set without rushing anywhere till Saturday. Carl Bildt again, he says, should have been in Kabul for this conference today, but this is the last day of school before summer, and sometimes family has to be priority. And then finally, some world leaders do not control their emotions. This is Hugo Chavez, great tweet, for watching football. It's another Twitter account worth following. The other thing is he just came back from cancer treatment in Cuba to Venezuela. That's a tweet from 2 days ago. And he also then started again his Twitter account. I'm still wondering if it's him or somebody very close to him, because he's tweeting from a BlackBerry. Here is basically gracias a Fidel, a Raúl y toda Cuba. So thank you to Fidel, Raúl, and Cuba. And thanks to Venezuela for so much love. So with that, grazie, thank you very much. And I think we're opening it up to questions.
Thank you. We have plenty of time for questions, and
yes,
thank you very much for being so fast, because your presentation was very long, and I was worried it might take too long, but it was so much fun. I have first one question, and then if people will raise their hands, I think someone in the room will bring them the microphone. Is this all there is to it? Politicians going on Twitter for the visibility, for the propaganda, just to sort of, to be likable, or is there something else? Is something really changing thanks to the fact that there is such a new instrument in communications? This new medium, Twitter, is that really changing the way we communicate in politics and the way our democracy works, or not really yet?
Well, it depends. It depends who you're talking about. Some people just use it for propaganda purposes. Just broadcasting, never replying. Give you an example. For example, if you follow the South Korean president, or if you follow the Australian Prime Minister, they will actually automatically follow you back. Now try to send them a direct message, and hoping for an answer, you will never get it. So. Now, I'm a bit harsh on Julia Gillard from Australia, but that's definitely the case for the Koreans. But then others, we've seen how they're now realizing the Twitter chats. And the Twitter chat, compared to a traditional press conference, is it's actually very secure, because they can choose, which questions they want to answer. Of course, they don't have to answer all the questions. 62 questions in 30 minutes, that's very, very good. But some questions will be left unanswered, But the main difference is that before we could send an email to to the head of state, the government, and somebody from his staff would read it, but maybe you would get a reply, but probably not. Now all this is public, and and I think we have the power now to ask questions to our world leaders, and if they're pertinent, if they're constructive, I think they must reply, and they will get to that stage where yes, we have to open up. It's all public now, thanks to Twitter. Before nobody knew that you'd send an email to a head of state. Now it is out in the open, and I think the role now of the leaders is to organize weekly or monthly Twitter chats. Half an hour. That's all it takes to sit down, take questions, or like we've seen the examples in Africa in the evening, answer questions and just fire away. It's. So I think it has definitely changed, the way world leaders behave.
Our Prime Minister Mario Monti had a Twitch chat. I mean, and as you know, I told you about it. It was very contested because it was. I mean, there was a lot of expectations, and in the end, he only retweeted me, and he never really replied to criticisms. So he was very contested. I mean, people were expecting a high, his presence on Twitter as being very sophisticated. And actually, he had a social media team doing the tweets. He wasn't doing it directly. He showed a picture of himself with someone else tweeting for him. He was fielding the questions, obviously, and he was choosing which ones to answer to, because when there's so many questions, there's no way in an hour he could answer to everybody. But he was very criticized. I mean, Obama, who did the same thing, the first time he did it, he answered only 10 questions, but he was not as criticized as our Prime Minister. Now, why do you think that is?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, did Obama, Obama, I think
my question is, did Monti do something wrong? Was something that he was doing that was wrong, maybe using the social media stuff, or is there something that he didn't communicate well?
Well, I think it depends. It's the first, he just started Twitter in December, and there's, this Twitter, this new way to communicate, and of course, whenever there is a negative tweet, people say, oh, what do we do now? It's the end of the world. No, it's not. Tweet has a half-life of an hour or 2 hours, and then it's gone, it's dead. You'll never find it again. So, but this is kind of stresses them. How do they reply to criticism? And bring the discussion forward. So I think we do need some education, and I took that example of the smile, the sorriso during the Twitter chat. Now that's a little more personal side. Even Barack
he was
Obama.
so criticized for the smile. I mean, everybody knows that around here, right? When they said it's not his style, there's no way it could be him. He never smiles, so there was no way.
Yeah, probably then.
It was a staff smile.
So, well, then it was clearly the staff smile. Now, do I expect world leaders to write the messages themselves? Probably not. I think it is okay if they, have somebody a scribe for them, but as long as somebody really close to them and, really translating, his thoughts. So, I mean, they're all allowed to have a secretary, I think, but this is the question: how are they really personal or not? If it is only done for electoral purposes, and we've looked at the 6 Twitter accounts for Italy, it's. Will this, if one of them is elected, will he use his Twitter account personally or not? And then the next question is, if you look at the personal account of Barack Obama, this is very, very important. Barack Obama's account is a campaign account run by the Democratic Party. The White House account, the White House does not follow Barack Obama, very interestingly, because that would mean endorsing the candidate Barack Obama. The White House did not follow Mitt Romney either, or any other US presidential candidates. The same happens in France. The François Hollande account stopped because the Socialist Party just, nobody is running the account while he's president, but the Élysée Palace does not follow François Hollande. So there's a strict limitation between, this is a private account of a potential candidate. And we just checked, basically, Palazzo Chigi is following almost all the candidates, not all of them, but most of them. So that is quite interesting. Should Palazzo Chigi follow Senatore Monti? Theoretically, he's a candidate, you shouldn't give him any more, government funding. Government funding also to run a personal Twitter account. So all these are, I think, questions that in each government have to be decided. Who's owning the Twitter handle? The other thing is Barack Obama is the most followed person. So I had the chance to meet the digital team who made it happen, and I asked, so what will you do with this account in 4 years? That account might, have 50 million followers. So will you rename it with the new Democratic Party candidate? They actually told me, well, we thought about that, because then immediately the candidate would have 50 million followers, but they've decided not to, because, you do follow Barack Obama because it's Barack Obama, and you don't want to follow any other Democratic candidate. But it is clear that Barack Obama, with his Twitter power, in 4 years' time, he will put, he will basically do a Follow Friday and say, please endorse my successor, and to vote for him. But it's interesting, and in that way, actually, the papal account is probably the best. I thought Pope Benedict would start tweeting on Benedictus XVI, which they did not. They chose Pontifex. Pontifex is it's an institutional personal account, if you see what I mean. Is that now that he is leaving the papacy, his successor will also take over the Twitter account and grow the followers. So it's not something that will die, or will the Twitter account will cease with him not being Pope. So I think it was a very, very good choice to use at Pontifex, which can then be handed down from generation to generation, from Pope to Pope.
I have a million more questions, but I would like them to have a chance to ask you. Who's first? Please. Can you say your name?
I'm Antonio Pavolini, and I was very much struck by the President Chavez tweet celebrating the goal, I think, scored by Venezuela. And that reminded me something dating back to the early 80s when President Pertini, I think everybody of my age remembered the picture of President Pertini standing up and celebrating a goal at the stadium and being shot by the cameras, and that picture was really an icon of that time. So aren't we probably overestimating the role of the online tool when we see that good communicators are good even with mainstream traditional top-down tools? Or you maybe have some examples of heads of state that score very well with the mainstream tools and failed with online tools.
I mean, basically, we only took one tweet from Hugo Chavez, but if you look at his Twitter feed, it is very, very personal and very engaging. And you'll see Venceremos and Hasta la Victoria. It's a revolutionary account. So it is. I think it frames perfectly, his personality. That same tweet with Senatore Monti just wouldn't go down well. He couldn't do that. If I didn't know the story about the smile, that he never smiles, so I thought maybe on Twitter he would start. But if that's the case, of course, that was the wrong tweet to write. So there is no right or wrong rule how you should how you should tweet. I would the advice is be personal, be engaging, be open, and even if it's a Twitter account, it's your personal Twitter account, and your team is running it. Make it clear in the bio of the Twitter account, saying basically my team is running this account, as Julia Gillard from Australia says that. And whenever it's her tweet, the tweet is from her, she will sign JG, or Barack Obama signing BO. He hasn't sent or signed many tweets since he started this. But it's with that we know if this is a real a personal one, if it's just from his team. And the Barack Obama account was actually extremely active during the election campaign, and anyone who would follow it would get I think they had something like 30 tweets a day, which is we can't read all that. So like some of the Italian politicians are very, very active right now. I saw average of 100 tweets a day. It's incredible. So there's no right or wrong way. I mean, I always say sometimes there's a 30-30 rule. 30% you should broadcast. 30% you should reply to other Twitter users, and 30% you should kind of mention other users and send them to other articles that you find interesting, and then you have 10% that stays as kind of for fun, do something. But of course, if the politician is not personally engaging, it would fall flat. It would be the wrong tool to use.
If there are any questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I have questions. When does it backlash? I mean, you showed a whole all different ways of politicians all over the world how they're tweeting. Do you have examples of when it really backlashed? I mean, what they did, if they tweeted in a wrong way, did that have an effect, you think? Or did people unfollow? Did they get bad responses? Did you notice that as much as we noticed it on the Italian ones? And by the way, I'd love to show your other slide. It would be nice to get to the Italian analysis.
Well, there was one, I showed the tweet of what's his name, the Estonian president, and also, it's the Estonian president. He used an insult. He's not the only one. Right. The president of Panama used an insult, and he said, "Oh, it wasn't me. It was my daughter." And then it turned out it was him. The other one is the Russian president, or then president, Dmitry Medvedev, during the demonstrations in Moscow. And Dmitry Medvedev, also has a surname called iPhonechick, because he has his iPhone, he has his iPad, and he actually does read tweets and etc. And so apparently, I don't know if it was him, it was another administrative error. Basically, he tweeted on his account, an insult was retweeted against the Alexander Navalny, the democracy activist, that came over on the presidential's personal account. The Kremlin later said that it was due to somebody did a wrong manipulation, as he did some administrative stuff on the account. So there are 3 incidents. Now, what happened? Yes, it was picked up by the Russian blogosphere. But then, would you unfollow Dmitry Medvedev for that? I would not, because you want to stay in touch, you want to see what he has to say. And I think Medvedev's Twitter account is actually quite interesting, because it comes across as very, very personal. He tweets in Russian and it's immediately translated into English. I think he has a very, very good social media team. And, he first put the presidency, the Russian presidency, the Kremlin on Twitter, and then he... when he became prime minister, he also put the Russian government on Twitter. And so I think he's a great example of how you can use Twitter. And these people are, like you and me, they get angry, and sometimes it just goes out on Twitter, And we will see more and more of these accidents. Accidents happen. As long as we don't see a war starting on Twitter, I hope not. Because there's another example of the former Colombian president who basically insulted Hugo Chavez, saying he's a murderer, etc. on Twitter. Luckily, he was no longer president. So but imagine that would have come from the official account of the Colombian president. But we will see more and more of these public exchanges, and I find it exciting to read them. It's not all just broadcasting. Here's Antonio.
Prego.
Antonio De Ruda. Matthias, the digital diplomacy was born in the US, of course. Now we know the alliance between Washington and San Francisco. But what other countries do you see right now using very well these tools? I think UK, Israel, Turkey. But can you suggest us some small countries, for example? Because usually people think that digital diplomacy is just for big power, for superpowers. But it's not actually, no? So can you suggest us some names?
Somalia. The president of Somalia is on Twitter. The Minister of the Interior and the entire government is now using Twitter. South Sudan. South Sudan, is such a new country. For them, it was obvious they had to be on Twitter. So you have a Twitter account, Republic of South Sudan, So that's their way to be on the map. However, what I find quite interesting, if you look at the island states in the Pacific, very few of them use Twitter, but they should actually, because it's really a good way to put yourself on the diplomatic map. You know, South Sudan and Somalia are great examples of this. You know, but then you have other countries completely absent. Look at Denmark. You know, the Queen doesn't tweet, and neither does the Prime Minister. It's, you know, one of those exceptions. Or Iceland, the same. The government is not using Twitter. Now, is Twitter is only American because it was born there in 2006. But I think, you know, I think this presentation, I wanted to show other examples, not just only the American examples, and look what, you know, the State Department is doing. And, you know, as much as I respect Alec Ross, you know, he has done brilliant work at the State Department, you know, but there are other people. So yes, there is the UK, but then those are English-speaking countries. So of course for them it's much easier, you know, because the language, the international language on Twitter is English. You know, even Carl Bildt, the Swedish foreign minister, tweets in English. So his Twitter account where he takes questions is called Fråga Carl or Fråga Bildt. That is entirely in Swedish. So it's quite interesting how he has actually two accounts. But, you know, you mentioned Poland and Turkey, absolutely great examples of, you know, tweeting in several languages, especially the Turkish foreign minister. The foreign minister himself has an account in Turkish, English, and Arabic. Now, that's another, you know, Arabic is currently the language that has the most growth on Twitter. Now you see Turkey's influence in the Middle East, you know, with having an Arabic Twitter account for the Turkey's foreign minister. I think that says a lot about, you know, where Turkey's influence is. So Turkey, I think, is a great example. Poland, another great example, although Polish tweets are mainly in Polish. You know, the foreign ministry is, you know, all the embassies tweet in Polish, and not yet, you know, not yet in English. And, you know, for any European country, non-English speaking European country, this is the hurdle. You know, which language do you use? Which audience do you want to address? Do you want to address, as a foreign minister, a home audience, or do you want to address, you know, an international audience? And the international audience, like it or not, will speak English. And this is how, you know, how you communicate. And then, of course, every single embassy in different countries should rather use the language of the country, because that's the new audience they are most likely to connect with, and not just be travelers, you know, their own citizens traveling to that country in their language. So this is why I think, you know, the US and Britain have this clear advantage over all of us. Although, having said this, the Foreign Office has, you know, uses several languages, and as does the State Department. They have different language tweets.
I'm receiving some questions on Twitter. Andrea Orsenigo is asking, Twitter and China, what do you think about China?
Twitter and China, what do I think? I think Sina Weibo. Who's on Sina Weibo? Yes! Well, China, you know, as you know, the Great Firewall of China prevents access to Twitter and Facebook. That doesn't mean that China is not absent. Chinese not fond of social media. Actually, the social media scene in China is very much alive and very, very active. Just on, you know, it's all in Chinese and on platforms that, you know, we don't really know or understand. So Sina Weibo is the copy of Twitter. And of course, in Chinese characters, you can write, you know, hit stories in 140 characters, you know, much easier than on Twitter, or in Latin characters. So I think, you know, I personally think China is developing its own social, kind of protecting its market for its own social media networks. Maybe to better control them, but maybe also to control its own, you know, to grow its social media networks, you know, as an alternative to the American network. So, you know, I hope, in China, Twitter one day will be available, and Facebook. I'm quite optimistic that that will happen. Don't ask me in how many years. I'm an optimist, and I think, the way Twitter and Facebook have changed the world. You can see it's, it does open up countries, and we can now be in touch with people. We never thought about. I mean, you can now tweet any world leader. You can tweet your prime minister. That did not exist before. I think this is the way we. I wouldn't have met Anna wouldn't it be for diplomacy in the study, or Antonio De Ruda, who wrote a book about digital diplomacy. So I think it's really kind of connecting us much easier. And the questions I get, I'll reply to some of them later on Twitter. I think this is a new way to communicate, and I expect every government leader to do the same. Just open up and talk to people.
Would you like to show the other slides?
Yeah.
Because I think we have just right time.
So basically, talking about the Italian elections, what I found quite interesting, and this is a presentation, a visualization done by Tweet Minister, actually an Italian who's running this out of London, called Elezionista. He's kind of following politicians around the world. This is also taken from Il Sole. And here you basically have the Italian candidates and how they're connected to each other, on Twitter and the different polls. I found this quite interesting. Then Anna pointed out the share of social media voice that Maria Rota is doing here for La Stampa. You can see the political volume of Berlusconi right now is extremely high, very very active.
I would like to explain that. This curve right up here is when he announced that he would abolish IMU.
I mean,
it's a tax. It's a huge tax that nobody likes, and for the campaign, that's when he became immediately very popular. Mm-hmm.
So I basically looked at the Twitter profiles of the main candidates. So you have Mario Monti, Bersani, Berlusconi, Beppe Grillo, and if you look at Antonio Ingroia and Oscar Giannino, what they don't have on their Twitter profile a header picture. So first, I think it's time they use a header picture. The other use it quite nicely. And here you can see that Mario Monti is now smiling, at least on his header picture on Twitter. And I'm always using Twitonomy. Twitonomy.com is only with one T, to look at not just who has the most followers, but what's really interesting is how do we engage. So you have here, yes, the most followers. The most tweets is Beppe Grillo. He also started way earlier, 8,900 tweets. I don't know if you can't probably read the figures. Most following is Bersani. He's following 53,000 people. Beppe Grillo only follows 260. Now that doesn't, show me much of, engagement with other Twitter users. But Beppe Grillo has the most followers, over 894,000 followers. The last one is Antonio Ingroia. And now you look at the tweets per day. Now Berlusconi and this is taking the 3,200 latest tweets. Yeah, that's as far back as you can get in the Twitter history. It turns out that the Berlusconi account is sending 99 tweets a day. Who's going to read all that? It's just, I don't understand it. So, but you can see the activity is quite high also for Beppe Grillo with 24, Monti with 10 tweets a day on average, and then Bersani and Ingroia and Giannino much more reasonable, 5 tweets a day. That's as much as as you can see. The other thing is quite interesting here, how many people retweet, what's the average of retweets? So Beppe Grillo retweets, 67% of his tweets are retweets. Retweets are also sometimes called a lazy form of tweeting. You just hit retweet and off it goes. But it does show some engagement. Bersani, who doesn't? Yeah, Bersani. Only 5% of his tweets are retweets, so most of it is it's his own content. And then we come to the engagement, at mentions and at replies. So Senatore Monti mentions 84% of his tweets mention other Twitter users. Which is quite interesting. But if we come, and Beppe Grillo never, or very rarely, only 1% of his tweets. And then at replies. So here we see Antonio Ingroia actually replies to, every fourth tweet is a reply to another Twitter user, over 26%. Beppe Grillo and Berlusconi have never, ever replied to any other Twitter user. So there, I think it's quite interesting to see there's no conversation going on with these two on Twitter. And then the last column is the percentage of retweets. How many tweets that they send are being retweeted? And the clear winner here is Mario Monti with over 99% of his tweets are retweeted. Clear loser is Beppe Grillo. Only 33% of his tweets are ever retweeted by other people. So I find that quite interesting. That maybe there's something wrong in terms of the tweets. Just here, this is the kind of statistics you can get from Twitonomy. Twitonomy is still free. Here we can see that Senatore Monti has only sent one retweet, but 99% retweets. And here we have the users most retweeted. Well, one person sitting right here, Anna Masera. So quite interesting. To see this. And of course, what you can also see is what are the most retweeted tweets. So Mario Monti's tweet is one of his first tweets, on the 25th of December, 1,500 retweets for his Saliamo in Politica tweet. So I've done that also for Bersani, as I said, here 5 tweets a day. Users most retweeted here. Interestingly, it is the official PD network and UDEM, with over 56 tweets and 43. And then his most retweeted tweet is actually his campaign poster, L'Italia Giusta. I think a couple of hundred tweets. So I did the same for Berlusconi, where you can see only 5 replies, which is 0%, but the 99 tweets a day, quite a lot. And his most retweeted tweet, ecco chi ha firmato il decreto che ha permesso a Equitalia di avere tutto il potere che ha oggi. And then a tweet pic actually of the decree. So going over to Beppe Grillo, and this is kind of devastating that only 32% of his tweets have been retweeted and only 2 at replies. You can see who to Bioblu and Giancarlo Canch, whoever, that is only twice. So, and then his most retweeted tweet is 759 times. Now this is quite interesting. Given he has 800,000 followers, but only 759 retweets on a tweet, I don't think there's something he could definitely improve on his Twitter feed. Coming to Antonio Ingroia quickly.
Not only on his Twitter feed, I think.
Huh?
Not only on his Twitter feed. I mean, there's a lot of polemics on how he uses the public in terms of broadcasting, even if he's using Twitter.
So here, Ingroia, the most conversational, with 68 replies, and 184 user mentions on his tweets, and you can see the people he does engage with and mentions. And I like this reply here to Bersani: che sinistra è quella che rischia di far vincere la destra, la tua. Which it's you see this is something very 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 personal. Then the at replies here for Giannini, and 91% retweets, and also to replying to Bersani and Senatore Monti. So I think that just shows there is a conversation going on between them, and on Twitter. So his most retweeted tweet 1,168 times about the choice Benedetto. And then lastly, this slide, which you all know, the increase of Berlusconi's followers on January 1st, where he jumped by 53,000. You can see this in Twitter counter. This is public to anyone. This year, this is not a natural growth. So anyway, so that was just. Oops.
Thank you. I have a question, and some people from the audience asked me to ask you this. What do you think about Italy, and in terms of our level of digital education? Do you think we are digitally grown up or not?
Absolutely, because you have the president, the press office is on Twitter, Palazzo Chigi on Twitter, the politicians on Twitter. I hope they will stay after the elections. I think Italy is doing quite well. Has done catch up last year. It started in the second half of 2012. Italy is definitely in the G8 countries. Is present on Twitter digitally. Compared to my home country, I'm German, which is really light years behind, 5 years behind. Neither Angela Merkel is not on Twitter. Her spokesperson is, so tweeting, with a hashtag Kanzler, Chancellor, but it's
How
not.
do you explain that? Why? I
don't know. Apparently she loves SMS, so if she loves sending SMS, why don't we let her loose on Twitter? But maybe, her SMSs wouldn't translate for a public audience. I don't know. This is a supposition. I have no idea why German politicians don't take to Twitter. I mean, this year is also election year in Germany, so that might change. The opposition candidate is on Twitter and just started also in December. And we'll see by the time the elections come around, can Angela Merkel be the only G8 leader not to have a personal Twitter account? I think that is quite telling. If 7 of your peers have a Twitter account, the pressure is on to maybe join Twitter, even if you don't like it. And but we don't want her to tweet what she had for breakfast, but really kind of and this is what I always say. Be it politicians or company leaders, CEOs. I'm a big fan of a CEO tweeting. It just puts a human face on the company. But don't tweet, in which airport lounge you are, or what you had for breakfast. Only tweet when you have something to say, and make sure it's short and sweet, in less than 100 characters, so that it can be retweeted. So this is. Why is Germany lagging behind? I don't know, but I know that Italy is definitely not lagging behind. And seeing the activity, especially of the Italian embassy in Washington and the Italian ambassador in Washington, and also Giulio Terzo. I was a bit harsh on on his Twitter account, but I think there is in the Farnesina there is really kind of a willingness to make this this jump to social media. For example, the Italian embassy in Washington has a brilliant social media hub, a visualization of where the embassy is present on which social networks. Because here I've only focused on Twitter. Of course you can also add on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. I mean, you name it. There's so many different platforms that each government or each government agency now has to be present on. Of course, that puts huge pressure on an organization, and when not only government organizations, companies, they say, well, I think most of them just hope it will go away one day. No, it won't go away, and you have to engage, you have to be present, and this is really the key message. Twitter has changed the world. It's like, are we ready to embrace this change and to follow this path?
I'm still asking if somebody would like to get up and have the courage to speak in English and ask.
Anche in italiano va bene.
Otherwise, I have more, of course. But there's many questions coming from Twitter. But c'è un microfono, grazie. Dici il tuo nome.
Hi Matthias, my name is Eduardo. Thanks for the presentation. Also, thanks for showing us that Berlusconi is also buying followers, not just electors. But so my question is that, in certain cases, Twitter can be quite dangerous, such as in 2011, the riots in London. What do you think should be the role of the government or political leaders in that situation when Twitter can incite people to, act and do riots?
Good question. I mean, was it really Twitter or was it BlackBerry Messenger?
It was both of them.
It was both of them. It was BlackBerry Messenger. I think, boy, unfortunately, we have to live with that. It's almost impossible to turn it off. We've seen attempts in Iran, to turn, in Syria, in Egypt, turning the internet off. That's, you do the master switch. That's, I hope it won't happen again. But I think governments, if they open up, the criticism will not be as harsh. And people organizing riots, yes, that, it might happen, but it's not Twitter, it's not social media that, that created these. There were riots before, in Brixton in the 80s, the Brixton riots. It's not something that Twitter has created. It has given them a tool, much easier now to organize, much easier to organize your birthday party, using Facebook, inviting all your friends. But I think governments should just, unfortunately, they have to live with it, but if they open up, the criticism, if they open up and engage with citizens through different means, not only through Twitter, but also, more citizen participation. We've seen the Foreign Office for the digital strategy. That was just one example. In the US, they're doing have quite good examples of, getting kind of crowdsourcing government decisions. So I think that is the way forward. So. But I wouldn't say, there might be riots, where basically people organizing the wrong way that we would. Should they jump in when they see the situation? Should they jump in if the situation heats up? They should definitely react to it. Yes, you have to be reactive, but you're not reactive by turning off the internet or BlackBerry Messenger. You have to be.
Really engaging.
You have to. It's really engaging. Once you see that so many people tweet you a specific question or something, well, reply to it. There's definitely something. If you see, there's a movement, and that with Twitter you see it immediately. You don't have to wait for the traditional media to report it the next day. You can see social movements bubbling up on social media.
I have two questions that just came up on Twitter. One of them is. What about the most popular Italian politicians on Twitter that are not running for prime minister, which are Renzi and Vendola? Now, we didn't look them up.
Mi dispiace, non ho guardato Renzi e Vendola.
But you can look them up on Tweetonomy. If you look Tweetonomy and you put their name in, their Twitter account, you can really find the statistics and see how they're engaging on Twitter. Absolutely. And they're actually, I've seen them, and they're doing really well on Twitter, much better than Beppe Grillo in terms of following and engaging with their followers. Beppe Grillo is much more popular than they are, but they're more engaging. And the other question is about WikiLeaks. I mean, of course, since your diplomacy expertise, can you tell us how you judge the impact of Cablegate, WikiLeaks Cablegate, 3 years from now, from when it started?
Good question. I mean, I do think, in the US, WikiLeaks was kind of a wake-up call. They would rather it would go away, but I think that kind of prompted the whole, 21st century statecraft, opening up, engaging, that, Hillary Clinton did. So the other thing is, of course, WikiLeaks, all the cables now, what is happening now, none of when ambassadors tweet, for example, there is no way the ambassador or the diplomat on site will have the time to check with higher up. We saw that at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, where they basically condemned the film that went up on YouTube, the anti-Muslim film on YouTube. They still had the time to check with Washington, but then still went ahead and did their own communications. It is also, for government organizations and companies, is also that you decentralize communications. In companies, that means the head of communications is no longer the only one who's allowed to speak. Now it's like everyone is communicating on Twitter. So that is a great challenge for governments. and of course for organizations. Who's allowed to speak for the government? Well, guess what? We always spoke for our companies to friends, in bars in the evening. Now we do it publicly on Twitter and on Facebook, and guess what? You got to live with it, and make sure that your employees are happy, that they will become your brand ambassadors, and tweet nicely and and post nicely on Facebook. And the same, with, of course, with the government is, the stress is that some rogue tweet, somebody might say something that he shouldn't have. Well, it is bound to happen. And this is in companies. Very often you get legal and compliance involved. Now who's running the communications? Is it the legal and compliance team or the communications team, or is it actually every one of us? All the employees. I think we're coming to that really decentralized communication where the leader just has to give kind of a general guidelines. That's what you should have. Unlike social media guidelines. We have basically one in our organization is just don't be an idiot.
So one thing that came across in your whole speech this evening is that there really is a huge job opportunity here for young people. I mean, I see a lot of young people here, social media editors for politicians and as social media teams, right? I mean, they all use a staff of social media experts, so there's new jobs coming up. Considering the big crisis there is right now in jobs, I mean, it sounds like this is a great job opportunity.
This is a growth, growth sector. It won't go away. It will grow. Organizations need social media managers. So, I think it's, that's the new way forward. And coming back to that, is really an editorial job. I'm a former journalist. I left journalism, and I know how important this is in Italy. I left journalism in 2004 to work for the World Economic Forum. In 2006, I put the World Economic Forum on YouTube, in 2007 on Twitter and then Facebook. And I basically discovered again, even doing public relations for an organization, that I was once again the editor, the journalist I had been before. Now this time I wasn't paid by a newspaper, or I was working for a TV station, but I was paid by a company. But I think that's the corporate communications have changed. We really have to do PR like a very journalistic work, not only writing about what we do as a company, but really kind of writing for our readers. What could be interesting for our readers? I always remember that when I ran the World Economic Forum account, Twitter account, which now has 1.8 million followers. So I was always thinking, what could interest readers? And then I asked them, what can we improve? What do you want? And this is how we have to change our ways of communicating, because we want to give our readers, our Twitter followers, our Facebook friends, the most value for their time. Why should they read our tweets if it's just broadcasting a press release which was reduced to 140 characters? So I think there's a huge change, but of course a great opportunity for any young person who wants to start out. So. Social media editor is the way forward. I never thought I would do the job I'm doing now in my career plan. Not that I had one, but I think it's great. The communicating in 140 characters or less, is such a challenge. I always say it's like writing headlines. A good tweet. I do. It's really a headline, and it's like in a newspaper. If the headline is interesting, if it's catchy, you will read the rest of the article. The tweet is the same. If the tweet, if it's a boring tweet. You won't read it, but if it's nicely written, if there's you will read it, and you will come back and look at this person's tweet, for more entertainment, actually. So I think there is a great role, but there is this journalistic aspect to it, and I always say you need to find an editorial line. My personal Twitter account, I don't think I've found an editorial line yet. I did tweet this morning my cappuccino. Just why would I tweet the cappuccino, obviously? But I was listening to Gianna Nannini, and so for me that was Italy. Sorry, yes. But then and I always say it. We've done a couple of Twitter tips, which we do currently. Some 50 Twitter tips which we tweet each day on BM Digital from the Burson Marstella digital strategists. So each day a Twitter tip, and you can see them also in the Storify summary. And I actually said, don't tweet what you had for breakfast. And well, I just broke my own rule, but that's what rules are there for. But then, coming back to the editorial line, so the Twitplomacy account, which only started in July last year, has over the past 6 months gained 4,000 followers, but only because of one thing. There's an editorial line. I will only tweet about the use of digital tools by governments and international organizations, and nothing else. I will not tweet, what I had for breakfast, or and that account, because it has such a clear editorial line, it is actually useful to the people who follow it, and that I find quite interesting. So keep that in mind as an organization. If you're tweeting for your organization or even for your personal account, maybe some stuff, if it's personal, stick it on Facebook for your friends and not necessarily to all your public followers. But I mean, everybody has to decide his own editorial line.
Now, what do you do with your followers? I mean, if you quit your job and move over to somewhere else, will you bring your followers with you, or will you have to give them up? How do you feel about that?
No, I mean, if you have a personal account, if it is unbranded, so your name, your first name, last name, and there's you basically change your bio and you take your followers with you. That's what I did from when I left the World Economic Forum, went to Masera, and it's clear if I should I change jobs again, I will take my followers. Now, if I have the Twitplomacy account, it's clearly property of Masera. So the day I leave Masera, unfortunately, I will have to leave Twitplomacy, which is I don't want to do. So I'll stick with Masera. But this is very clear. Now, if you have like CNN reporters, they have first name, last name, CNN. Now then, it's complicated. When you leave, do you leave on good terms? You can probably take the followers with you. If you leave on bad terms, they'll keep the account and. Or whatever they'll do with it, but this is the question. What do you do? Also, what do you do when you die? Who's going to inherit your your Twitter account? It's like I'm starting to think about these things now that I'm approaching 50s. So make sure you give somebody your logins already. So all these questions, it's something. It's all what I like about it is all trial and error. And we're all learning. Politicians are learning. You are learning. I am learning. It's a great learning process.
It is for me too. It's a great job. And if nobody has any more questions, are you being shy? Oh, there it is. You can ask me questions too.
Okay, I'm Elisa Vimercati. I'm asking for tips. Could you give us just 3 tips about how we could use those incredible power to use our citizenship in Italy to dialogue with politicians? Just what we can do tonight, 3 things, and 3 tips about how to choose an editorial line. I chose the topic, and then I have to find the tone of voice and how to use this on Twitter.
I'll start with the editorial line. Basically, look at a theme that you're interested in. Look if there is a hashtag or several hashtags around the theme. To give you an example, Twitplomacy is only I use Twitplomacy, and some people hate it. They don't like the hashtag Twitplomacy. They want to say it's digital diplomacy. So the UK uses digital diplomacy, and in the US they use e-diplomacy. So basically, I'm looking every morning on my way to work. I commute on the bus. I look up what are the latest tweets, and then I will comment on it or retweet them, if it's newspaper articles, throughout the day. Just scheduling them throughout the day. You can do that nicely when you're using a Twitter client like Hootsuite. You can schedule actually, if you and I, we probably think, 8 o'clock in the morning, everybody will read my tweet. You can now schedule these tweets when most people are likely to see it. Now this gets interesting. So you just schedule it, and it goes out when you have your biggest audience. So I like that. So the editorial line is just really, make it, find that niche, find that something that interests you, and it can be anything. It can be gardening. It can be, just that you want to share. And then you will also find that the more you share about a specific topic, you will get in touch with specific people. That's how I met Antonio, because he tweeted about digital diplomacy, and there are other people in Washington, in Oregon, all over the world. I'm now connected with people that are interested in this topic, and this is this is kind of, you know, how I see, you know, editorial lines. So I think a hashtag is a good start. So it doesn't really matter who you follow, but it's follow the hashtag and search Twitter, you know, what is being said. What could you do for citizen engagement? Well, you know, help your leaders, you know, engage with them, you know, kind of about topics that you're interested in. Now, they're very active right now, really broadcasting, because we're in this election phase. Suggest more, you know, Twitter chats, you know, etc. But you know, you're alone, you know. But even if you're alone, one voice counts. You know, the more you can get them to engage on a theme, you know, the better. But it's difficult to give 3 tips. Just, you know, tweet as you eat 3 times a day, but don't tweet about what you eat. You know.
In the meantime, someone just tweeted that maybe due to our conference here, Oscar Giannino just resigned.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's not because of us.
No, you may not know, but he's in a big scandal because he said he had a master's degree that he did not have. So he didn't graduate, and he said it, so they found out.
Did he announce that
and
on
he
Twitter?
Announced it on Twitter just now.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, this is the way, you know, decisions are being announced. I didn't show, you know, Herman van Rompuy, he announced the decision of the agreement for the EU budget on Twitter. Hugo Chavez announced his return to Venezuela on Twitter. Twitter is really becoming the way to communicate yeah. with journalists. You know, sending press releases just won't work anymore. Statements, just make it short and sweet on Twitter.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, everyone.